Volume 4 of the third year arc is finally released, and just as expected, this volume is quite controversial and divides the readers into a few different reactions. Some readers loved it, some others don't care, and the rest simply have a mixed opinion, and whether you like it or not, this volume indeed has a few negative aspects that cannot be ignored. Let's start with the most controversial one, which is Ayanokoji throwing away his victory to save Hiyori. This one particular scene is quite uncomfortable to read, because after everything that Ayanokoji has done, giving up because of love sounds totally out of his character, or maybe it's better to say that his choice feels really forced, as if the writer no longer knows how to make Ayanokoji lose. As a very intelligent character in a story full of smart characters, we should have expected Ayanokoji to lose by finally getting outsmarted, either by Koenji or the combined effort of everyone. So giving up because of love is definitely a very lazy way that obviously would make a lot of readers angry. Not to mention that the method is also pretty dumb, which is Riwin simply ordering Hiyori to lose, and Hiyori just accepts it without any resistance. Riwin sacrificing one of his best students already sounds dumb, and even if he had already prepared 20 million just in case Ayanokoji didn't budge, he still wouldn't be able to get the first place, and would lose 20 million along with his reputation. However, the same case doesn't apply to Ayanokoji. Even though he threw away his victory, there are probably a few greater reasons behind his action. In his scene with Hiyori, Ayanokoji made it clear that he only acts for himself, and he wanted to learn about the unfamiliar feeling inside him, which is a pretty valid reason for Ayanokoji. However, if you look at everyone's reaction to his action, what Ayanokoji has done surprisingly brings a lot of interesting development. For example, the way his new classmates saw him will undoubtedly change. After the last 3 volumes showed us how Ayanokoji was accepted as the leader and they followed his every command, Ayanokoji always led them toward victory. However, with his questionable actions and their last position on the newest exam, the opposition will eventually arise inside Ayanokoji's class. Just like Morishita, more people will start to think that Ayanokoji is a spy from Class A, and if Ayanokoji cannot give them a good answer, his opinion or even his position as their leader will be ignored, and they will start thinking for themselves. This is probably a weird theory, but judging by Ayanokoji's goal, he probably will be happy if his own class starts to become more independent and not solely dependent on him. Ayanokoji, who carried the whole class, has been a problem ever since he was still in Horikita's class. And you can also see how his new class seems very hopeless without him in the previous volume, so his class becoming more independent is actually beneficial for Ayanokoji. Not to mention that if you look at the newest class point, there are only around 300 class points between the highest and lowest class. So Ayanokoji's new classmates could try to fight on their own for a while, even if Ayanokoji eventually becomes their leader again at the end. Speaking of class points, if only Ayanokoji's group wins first place and Ayanokoji gets the most token rewards in this exam, his class will immediately become Class A, and Ichinose's class becomes Class C. Since I am pretty sure Ayanokoji already thinks about this, maybe another reason why he chose to lose is because he doesn't want the competition to end this early. By getting last place and falling into Class D, the cooperation with Ichinose's class will still continue, and Horikita's class could still take a breath despite losing Shinohara. With more than half a year still left in their third year, even 300 class points doesn't seem to be a really big gap to close, so if Ayanokoji really wants an equal battle to last as long as possible, losing in this exam is actually the right choice. To put it simply, by purposely losing in this exam, Ayanokoji gives himself a chance to learn about love, a chance for his new class to develop, a hope for Riwin to win, a time for Horikita to prepare against him, and lastly he gives another purpose for Ichinose. It's been theorized for a long time that Ichinose will start targeting Hiyori, and the last part of this new volume finally gives us a clear confirmation that Ichinose wants to get rid of her so she can stand beside Ayanokoji. If Ayanokoji knew about this, which of course he did, openly admitting that he loves Hiyori will lead Ichinose to attack Riwin's class, forcing them to level up before eventually fighting Ayanokoji in the end. It also came to my attention that the special attention that Ayanokoji gives to Kushida in this exam will also most likely reach Ichinose's ears. So by developing his relationship with more women, Ayanokoji actually leads their class to a disaster called Ichinose, which means that there will be another challenge for both Horikita and Riwin to face. And now let's talk about the exam as a whole, because I really believe the execution of this exam cannot live up to the hype from trial reading and synopsis. For starters, the rules of the exam are really complicated, with a lot of aspects to exploit, and a lot of possible ways to manipulate class points to a certain extent. However, despite having a lot of penalties and restrictions, the new volume barely even touched half of the rules, and went straight to the drama that only focused on Ayanokoji's group. This is not the first time Kinugasa made very complicated rules just to deliver a really plain exam, but this exam had been hyped up a lot ever since the end of the previous volume, so it is just natural to feel disappointed. Instead of becoming an exam where students could compete and show their capability, this new exam feels like a simple plot device to deliver drama between Shinohara and Kushida. To make it worse, since almost the entire volume only focused on Ayanokoji's group, we don't even see how Ichinose, Harikita, and Ryuin actually compete and create a strategy to exploit the rules, so all of those complicated rules feel really wasted. I don't say this is a bad exam, but with all the concepts and how big the rewards are, this exam should have been able to deliver more than just Shinohara's expulsion. They could have shown how 3 classes united to exclude Ayanokoji, or they could have even made all classes lose a huge amount of class points, but all we got is just Kushida begging on her knees, which actually isn't really bad. And now let's talk about the whole conflict with Ika and Shinohara, because if I need to be honest, I am pretty sure Kinugasa fumbled Iki's character. Ika was first introduced as a background character who got quite a lot of spotlight, but quickly lost his screen time when more characters got introduced. However, he got a decent amount of development even as a side character. He was the first one to ever ask Ayanokoji to hang out as a friend, and even though he avoided him after the sports festival, it's just normal for a high schooler to feel jealous. Iki's biggest development happened in the uninhabited island exam, where Ayanokoji helped him find a way to save Shinohara, and Ika later asked Ayanokoji to accompany him to meet Komiya. So when Ika said that he isn't really friends with Ayanokoji in volume 9.5, it keeps striking me as some kind of bad writing. Maybe Ika just forgets things easily, or maybe he just cannot understand Ayanokoji, but I do believe he doesn't hold any negative feelings toward him. And then came the transfer class. Rumors about Ayanokoji expelling Yamochi started to spread, and added to how Ayanokoji treated him without care, Iki's attitude toward him was actually justifiable. The same thing could be said about Shinohara. She hates Kushida, but Kushida's acting that turns everyone to protect her is really annoying if you look at it from Shinohara's perspective. Since she already knew how Kushida on the inside, not letting her become the representative is actually a wise choice. However, Ayanokoji and the others keep provoking her and praising Kushida, so she fights back with the only method she can, which is cornering Kushida, or even expelling her if possible. This new volume finally shows us the real consequence of Volume 5's second-year arc, and Kushida finally got what she deserved for mocking Shinohara. However, just like how he expelled Sakura, Ayanokoji didn't deliver justice, but just pursued the outcome that he wanted. Shinohara has a reason to expel Kushida if she wanted to, but this story is not about which character represents justice, but which character holds the most power. Ayanokoji prefers Kushida, so no matter how dangerous or evil she is, he decides to keep her because that will bring more benefit to him. The way he kept provoking Shinohara without a good reason is honestly the reason why I cannot hate Shinohara even when she makes Kushida Dogeza, because all of her actions are actually understandable. Overall, the whole volume really portrays Ika and Shinohara as the bad guys, even though if you look at it from their perspective, Ayanokoji is the real villain just like he always does. Ika who droll when Kushida offering her body is a bit disturbing to see, but still it's not Iki's fault because a lot of people still believe in the devil even when they know her true face. Speaking of Kushida, the way she starts to show a bit of her true personality in front of everyone reminds me a lot of Harikita back in Volume 5's second-year arc. Harikita said that Kushida would be a crucial asset for them to reach Class A, but in this volume she directly helped Ayanokoji to expel Shinohara, so the entire Harikita's speech back then started to bite her in the ass. As you can see, instead of contributing, Kushida could even become their worst enemy to graduate as Class A. She could become a spy for Ayanokoji, and if she starts to show her true self in front of everyone in the school just like what she did in this volume, her greatest weapon will lose its power, and Kushida will just become another student who is good at study. Saving Kushida has damaged Horikita's reputation quite a lot, so if the class found out Kushida took a part in expelling Shinohara, or if Kushida later damaged the class even further, Horikita could say goodbye to her leadership. Whether she like it or not, Kushida is her responsibility, so every action that Kushida takes from here will heavily affect Horikita. However, Kushida's choice to be more honest with herself is actually refreshing to see. We have seen a lot of Kushida's monologues where she starts to get tired of her fake personality, and this volume finally pushed her off the cliff. How Ibuki kicked her and finally gave her the courage she needed is quite a surprise, but a welcome one because Ibuki is the type who never cares about people's opinions, so it makes a lot of sense for her to knock Kushida from her little theater. Kushida and Ibuki's relationship is what you call a friend of my friend, so looking at them playing around without Horikita between them is perfect for strengthening the bond between them. I think Ibuki's empty head and carelessness are what finally give Kushida the final push to be more honest, because even if Ibuki is hated and dumb, Kushida truly enjoys the moment she spent with her. And now let's talk about Ayanokoji's and Hiyori's relationship, because even though the method is lazy, there is something about Hiyori that doesn't feel right if you think about it. Sacrificing herself is not the problem, because the real issue is how she doesn't seem to mind dragging Ayanokoji with her. If you think about it, Hiyori literally asks Ayanokoji to throw away his position as the class leader for the sake of Ryuen, and that is not something a maiden in love usually does. By accepting Ryuen's order, Hiyori literally put Ayanokoji in a lot of trouble, and if Ryuen keeps using her like that, that is no different than Hiyori simply taking advantage of Ayanokoji. Since we have seen a lot of good-natured characters turn evil in this story, we need to prepare that Hiyori might not be as innocent as she looks. There is actually one side story that hinted at that possibility, so if Hiyori actually chose to manipulate Ayanokoji's feelings for her own benefit, that will be an insane turning point for both Hiyori and Ayanokoji. You probably didn't notice, but Ayanokoji's tactic in this volume is a bit different compared to his usual strategy. Instead of a clever analysis and exploiting the rules, Ayanokoji took a more emotional approach such as rage-baiting Shinohara, or creating uncertainty for his classmates. He plays with people's emotions, and eventually loses because of his own emotions. This approach of Ayanokoji's is honestly interesting to see, because since emotion is something that is unfamiliar for him, Ayanokoji playing on those fields could mean that he wants to learn more on how to use it, or is purposely holding back since he no longer has competition. However, Ayanokoji also ended up swallowed by it, and since emotion often goes out of control, this could be a really bad news for the readers. If Ayanokoji throwing victory because he loves Hiyori already caused a lot of outrage, there will be no telling how far Ayanokoji would go to play with his own emotions. Maybe in the future Hiyori will start demanding something strange, and we will see Ayanokoji act more and more out of his character. Something that the usual Ayanokoji will never do could happen just because Ayanokoji wants to test how far his heart will react. The key to this development will lie on Hiyori. If she were actually a good girl who loved Ayanokoji, she would try to fight back against Ryuen if Ryuen were planning to bring harm on Ayanokoji. But if she is not, maybe Ayanokoji would finally learn about heartbreak in the most cruel way possible. It's just a possibility, but since we already saw what Ayanokoji is willing to do for that love experience, maybe he will play along and dive deeper into his uncertain feelings. There is no telling if this development would become a good thing or not, but we as the reader better be ready if the power of love, or the power of friendship comes out more often. And now let's talk about the other characters' moment, which honestly barely get any attention in this volume. This volume surprisingly brings a lot of focus back to Ayanokoji in like the third-year volume so far, and Horikita or the other class leaders only appear in the beginning and at the end. It's honestly really disappointing that we don't get any scenes about how Horikita and Ichinose handling their exam, because this is the first time we've seen them together ever since the annihilation in the previous final special exam, and yet we didn't get to see how they are planning to push each other down, or cooperate to achieve the best result. The same thing could be said about Ryuen. The only thing he did was just ordering Hiyori to get expelled, and we didn't even get to see his internal conflict before he made up his mind. This is another thing that needs to be criticized about this special exam. There is a lot of room for manipulation or betrayal, but everyone only focused on their own group and almost ignored what happened to the others. You can also see how ignorant Ayanokoji about what Haruhito or Ryuen will probably do, and this is something that he usually never miss, so it just confirms the possibility of Ayanokoji actually holding back in this exam. Speaking of Ayanokoji, his little chat with Haruka is genuinely terrifying on the same level as Hiyori. Ayanokoji already mentioned that he wanted to prepare another way to spy on Class A back in Volume 2, but he actually did it so fast that Haruka is probably willing to share their VIP names with him. Haruka's attachment to Ayanokoji honestly needs to be studied, because even after Ayanokoji expelled Sakura without mercy, she kept trying to reminisce about the happiness of their past. It's probably love or just a delusion, but Haruka's character could offer a lot of potential conflict since she is not working for Ayanokoji because of blackmail or a 20 million promise, but a simple emotion called friendship. Just like Ayanokoji finally finding love, maybe he will start to value friendship if he keeps seeing Haruka unconditionally doing her best to keep him safe. Needless to say, their relationship most likely wouldn't end with a happy ending, but the way Ayanokoji would exploit that emotion somehow aligns with what he wanted to do with Hiyori. Maybe there will be a future where Ayanokoji actually changes and apologizes for everything he did, but for now, the future doesn't seem good for Haruka. Speaking of confusing relationships, the whole scene between Koenji and Michan actually feels really forced to read. We knew there was something going on between them, but for Koenji to come out and help her right in front of Ayanokoji made you wonder if Koenji was actually trying to cover his weakness or not. To make it worse, their conversation is also very vague to the point we still have no idea what exactly happened between them. But one thing for sure is, Koenji actually cares for her and doesn't want her to be expelled, so the mighty and nonchalant Koenji is finally having a weakness. This is quite a welcome surprise because since Koenji doesn't do anything else in this exam, it seems his father's order is not really affecting him that much, but the risk of Michan's expulsion actually made him uncomfortable. Once again, this is proof that the story is starting to take a more emotional approach, so don't be surprised if someday Koenji will also throw away his victory just to save Michan. And the last thing we need to talk about is Ichika's conversation with Tsubasa. There are actually a lot of things to talk about, but the most important thing is how Tsubasa was planning to change Ayanokoji's heart so he would reject the White Room. I already said that this volume takes a more emotional approach compared to usual, but this conversation somehow confirms that the way this high school story will end is not going to be an intelligence battle, but a more abstract way to help Ayanokoji regain a bit of his humanity. Of course the class battle will still be important, but the final goal of this story is not about who graduates as Class A, but about what will happen to Ayanokoji. We got more info about the situation outside the school, and even though it's still unclear who, there is someone outside the school who knows about the White Room and wants to take it down. However, how Tsubasa gained this much information is actually confusing. She was sent by Tsukishiro to observe Ayanokoji, so if she could get that kind of information, that means Tsukishiro is also on her side. It's not weird for Tsukishiro to end up supporting Ayanokoji, and there must be more people who are thinking the same thing, so it seems Tsubasa's journey will be focused on how to gain more allies, and how to expel Ishigami from school. However, how to change Ayanokoji's heart will be another level of challenge. We have seen him falling in love, so it's not entirely impossible for Tsubasa to take advantage of Hiyori and make Ayanokoji rethink his future. It's probably not the way most readers want it to be, but at least everyone is now connected. How Ayanokoji handles his feelings in the next volume will be crucial to determine how the story will develop. If Ayanokoji decides to make his relationship with Hiyori public, and Tsubasa somehow hears about Ayanokoji's action in this volume, she will undoubtedly pay special attention to Hiyori, and Ishigami who spied on her will also notice that development. It seems everything will start to revolve around Hiyori, and the topic about love and emotion will be heavily discussed in the future volume. It will disappoint some readers, but honestly speaking, that is actually the best possible approach the writers could come up with to handle Ayanokoji's character. Let's just hope Kinugasa will eventually find a way to balance love and logic, and not turn this series into a dating sims.